Ambassador Sarah Chen walked through the massive doors of the Galactic Council chambers, her heels clicking softly on the polished stone floor. The sound echoed in the huge space, mixing with the various clicks, growls, and musical tones of dozens of alien species talking among themselves. She had been humanity's representative for 3 years now, and the routine never changed. Every species would complain about something. Every species would demand something. And every species would look at her with barely hidden amusement when she spoke. The humans were useful, they all agreed on that. Humans were good at fixing problems, good at finding solutions that made everyone happy, and surprisingly clever when it came to building things. But they were soft, too emotional, too willing to say sorry, too eager to please. Sarah took her seat at the human section, a modest area compared to the grand platforms given to the major powers. The Saurian Empire had the biggest platform, their representatives sitting on throne-like chairs that made them look down on everyone else. The Zephyrian Collective occupied elegant floating seats that moved gently through the air. The Hegemony Coalition spread across multiple levels, showing off their numbers. And there was humanity. One simple chair, one woman in a plain blue uniform, one voice that always said please and thank you no matter how rudely others behaved. The session will now begin, announced Council Speaker Vorth, his translator turning his deep rumbles into standard galactic language. Today we discuss trade route conflicts in sectors 7 through 12. Sarah already knew what this was about. For months now, human merchant ships had been having problems in those sectors. Ships would break down just outside safe zones. Navigation systems would mysteriously fail. Pirates would attack at exactly the right moments when no help was nearby. But everyone knew the truth. The Saurian Empire was pushing human ships out of profitable trade routes. They wanted those paths for themselves, and they were making sure humans got the message. War Master Kazak rose from his throne-like chair, his massive reptilian form casting shadows across the chamber floor. His scales were dark green with gold, patterns that showed his high rank. When he spoke, his voice was deep and threatening even through the translator. The Saurian Empire has received complaints from human merchants, he said, making the word complaints sound like an insult. They claim our ships are causing problems. They say we are being unfair. They want the council to solve their problems for them. He paused, looking directly at Sarah with yellow eyes that showed no warmth. This is typical human behavior. When they cannot compete properly, they come crying to others for help. They expect the galaxy to treat them like children who need protection. Several other species made sounds of agreement. Sarah had heard these same comments hundreds of times before. She kept her face calm and professional, just like her training had taught her. "If I may respond," Sarah said, standing up smoothly. Her voice was clear and polite. "The United Earth government is not asking for special treatment. We are simply requesting that all species follow the same trade laws that the Council established." Kazak's laugh was a harsh sound that made several smaller species step back nervously. "Trade laws? Human ships are weak. Human crews are inexperienced. If they cannot handle the dangers of space travel, perhaps they should stay home." "With respect, War Master," Sarah continued, still keeping her tone even and diplomatic, "our ship logs show clear evidence of deliberate interference. Saurian vessels have been jamming communication signals, disrupting navigation systems, and providing real-time coordinates to pirate groups." "Prove it," Kazak snarled. Sarah activated her datapad, and holographic displays appeared in the center of the chamber. The evidence was clear and detailed. Ship positions, communication records, energy signatures that matched known Saurian military equipment. Everything was organized, professional, and impossible to argue with. The chamber fell quiet as representatives examined the data. Even Kazak's confident expression faltered slightly as he saw how thorough the human investigation had been. But then he recovered, waving a clawed hand dismissively. "This proves nothing. Space is dangerous. Equipment fails. Pirates attack. These are facts of life that strong species accept." Council Speaker Vorth made a thoughtful sound. "The evidence is interesting. However, the Saurian Empire raises valid points about the natural dangers of space travel. Perhaps this matter requires further investigation. Sarah felt the familiar disappointment that came with every council session. More investigation, more committees, more delays while human crews continued to die in accidents that everyone knew were not accidents. The United Earth government appreciates the council's careful consideration, she said, using the same polite words she always used. We will, of course, cooperate fully with any investigation. As the session continued, other species brought up their own complaints and demands. The Zephyrians wanted better access to human medical research. The Crystalline Confederation needed human engineers to fix their mining equipment. The Aquatic Collective required human diplomats to negotiate with species they could not communicate with directly. Everyone wanted something from humanity. Everyone expected humans to help solve their problems, share their knowledge, and fix their mistakes. And everyone expected humans to do it with a smile, to say please and thank you, and to never complain when they received nothing in return. Sarah noticed the pattern, just like she had noticed it in hundreds of previous sessions. Humans gave. Others took. When humans asked for help, they were told to be patient. When others demanded help from humans, they expected immediate results. Ambassador Chen called out Representative Zixis of the Zephyrian Collective, her voice like musical wind chimes. Your species has developed new quantum communication technology. We require access to this technology for our merchant fleets. Would be happy to discuss technology sharing agreements, Sarah replied automatically. Perhaps we could arrange a trade agreement that benefits both our species. Trade? Zixis sounded surprised, as if the idea had never occurred to her. Surely humanity wishes to contribute to galactic prosperity. This technology could help many species. Sarah recognized the guilt trip immediately. Humans were supposed to share freely because it was the right thing to do. Other species kept their best technology secret, but humans were expected to give everything away. Of course, Sarah said, maintaining her diplomatic smile. We can discuss the details after today's session. The session dragged on for several more hours. More complaints about human weaknesses. More demands for human help with various problems. More dismissive comments about human emotional responses and peaceful tendencies. As the representatives began filing out, Sarah could hear the conversations around her. Alien voices speaking in languages her translator picked up clearly. Humans are so predictable, one voice said. They will complain for a few weeks, then find ways to work around the problem, another replied. They always do. Too soft to fight. Back properly. Useful, though. Very useful. Sarah gathered her data pads and prepared to leave. Tomorrow she would file reports, send diplomatic messages, and try to find peaceful solutions to humanity's problems. Next week there would be another session where she would present more evidence, make more polite requests, and receive more empty promises. As she walked toward the exit, War Master Kazak stepped into her path. His massive form blocked the doorway, and his yellow eyes stared down at her with obvious contempt. Ambassador, he said, his voice dripping with false politeness. I hope humanity understands that space belongs to the strong. The weak must learn to adapt or stay home. Sarah looked up at him calmly. I will pass your message along to my government, War Master. Have a pleasant day. She walked around him without showing any fear or anger, keeping her expression neutral and professional. Behind her, she could hear his harsh laughter echoing through the chamber. Outside in the corridor, her aide James waited with the day's reports. How did it go? He asked. About as expected, Sarah replied, checking her messages. More delays, more committees, more investigations. James shook his head. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if we just stopped being so polite about everything. Sarah paused in reading her reports, looking at him with an expression he could not quite read. That's an interesting thought, James, a very interesting thought indeed. The emergency alert reached Sarah's quarters at 347 ship time. The harsh red glow of the communication system filled her small room as she quickly read the message that had just arrived from Earth. Her hands became very still as she read the report. Then she read it again, more slowly, making sure she understood every terrible detail. The New Horizon was gone. 237 people. Families moving to start new lives. Children who had been excited about seeing their new home. All dead. The ship had been traveling through the Kepler corridor following all proper safety protocols. They had filed their flight plan correctly. They had avoided known danger zones. They had carried no weapons and posed no threat to anyone. The Saurian attack ships had targeted them anyway. Sarah's communication system chimed with an incoming priority message from Earth. The face that appeared on her screen belonged to Admiral Patricia Ross, head of Earth Defense Command. Sarah had known Ross for years, had worked with her on military cooperation agreements. She had never seen the Admiral look like this before. "Sarah," Ross said without any greeting pleasantries. "You've seen the report?" "Yes," Sarah replied quietly. "The evidence is solid. Saurian military vessels, positive identification. They hunted down a civilian transport and murdered everyone aboard." Ross paused, her jaw tightening. "The children were calling for help right until the end. We have the recordings." Sarah closed her eyes briefly. "What are my instructions?" "Present the evidence to the Council. Demand justice. Follow normal diplomatic channels." Ross leaned forward slightly. "But Sarah, I want you to know that if the Council fails us on this, if they give us the usual bureaucratic runaround while the people who murdered our children walk free." The Admiral did not finish the sentence, but Sarah understood perfectly. "I'll contact the Council speaker immediately," Sarah said. 3 hours later, representatives from across the galaxy gathered in the Council chambers for an emergency session. The mood was different from the routine meetings Sarah was used to. There was tension in the air, a sense that something important was about to happen. Sarah had not bothered with her usual preparation routine. She had not practiced her diplomatic phrases or checked her appearance in the mirror. She had simply put on her uniform and walked to the chamber with files containing the evidence of humanity's greatest tragedy in decades. Council Speaker Vorth called the session to order quickly. "We are here to address urgent matters brought to our attention by the human representative." Sarah stood up. When she spoke, her voice was different. Gone was the warm, diplomatic tone she always used. Instead, her words were cold and precise. At 11:47 yesterday, the civilian transport vessel New Horizon was destroyed by military forces of the Saurian Empire. There were no survivors. 237 civilians are dead, including 63 children. The chamber erupted in surprised sounds from various species. This was not how humans usually presented their problems. Where were the polite requests? Where was the careful diplomatic language? Sarah activated the holographic display system. Images appeared in the center of the chamber, sensor logs showing Saurian battleships pursuing the human transport, communication recordings of families calling for help. The final moments of the New Horizon as weapons fire tore it apart. The evidence was overwhelming and horrible. Even species that normally showed no emotion for human problems looked disturbed by what they were seeing. "This is clear evidence of an unprovoked attack on a civilian vessel," Sarah continued in the same cold voice. "The New Horizon carried no weapons. It posed no military threat. It was following all established safety protocols and traveling in what should have been neutral space." She turned to look directly at War Master Kazak, who had risen from his throne-like chair. This was not an accident. This was not a misunderstanding. This was deliberate murder. Kazak's yellow eyes showed no guilt or shame, only irritation at being challenged. "The Saurian Empire does not recognize human authority in contested space. If human ships enter dangerous areas, they accept the risks. Contested space?" Sarah's voice carried a sharp edge that made several representatives step back nervously. "The Kepler corridor has been established neutral territory for over 50 years. Circumstances change," Kazak replied with a dismissive wave of his clawed hand. "Weak species must adapt or face the consequences." Sarah stared at him for a long moment. Around the chamber, other representatives watched in fascination. They had never seen a human ambassador look at anyone the way Sarah was looking at Kazak right now. "I see," she said finally. So the Saurian Empire's official position is that murdering human civilians is acceptable policy. I would not use the word murder, Kazak snarled. I would say natural selection. The chamber fell completely silent. Even species that regularly showed contempt for humanity seemed shocked by the War Master's casual attitude toward mass murder. Sarah nodded slowly, as if Kazak had just confirmed something she had suspected for a long time. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with representatives from every major species. The United Earth government demands immediate accountability for this war crime, she said. We require the arrest and trial of all Saurian personnel involved in this attack. We demand reparations for the families of the victims, and we insist on immediate guarantees that such attacks will never happen again. Kazak's harsh laughter filled the chamber. Demands? Humans making demands? He looked around at the other representatives as if sharing a private joke. Soft humans and their emotional responses. File your paperwork, Ambassador. Send your strongly worded letters. We are done here. Sarah watched him turn away dismissively. She looked around the chamber again, noting which species were nodding in agreement with Kazak, which ones looked uncomfortable but remained silent, and which ones seemed genuinely disturbed but unwilling to act. Council Speaker Vorth made a rumbling sound that the translators rendered as throat-clearing. This is certainly a serious matter. The Council will need time to review all evidence and consider appropriate responses. Perhaps we could form an investigation committee. No, Sarah said quietly. The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Representatives who had been preparing to leave stopped moving. Several translators made confused sounds, as if they were not sure they had heard correctly. I beg your pardon? Vorth said. Sarah picked up her data pads and files with calm, precise movements. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly to every corner of the vast chamber. The United Earth government has received the Galactic Council's response to the murder of our civilians. The message is quite clear. Human lives have no value in the eyes of this council. Human requests for justice are considered emotional outbursts, to be ignored. Human participation in galactic civilization is tolerated only as long as we provide services to other species while expecting nothing in return. She walked toward the center of the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the absolute silence. Very well. The United Earth government accepts this clarification of our position. Effective immediately, humanity is withdrawing from all diplomatic accords with species represented in this council. We are suspending all aid programs, ending all technology sharing agreements, and recalling all human personnel from joint projects. The chamber exploded in shocked sounds from dozens of species. This was not how humans behaved. Humans negotiated. Humans compromised. Humans found peaceful solutions. Sarah continued speaking as if she could not hear the chaos around her. Furthermore, I hereby formally notify the Galactic Council that the United Earth government is suspending what you have termed our courteous mode of operation. We have operated under the assumption that other species shared our values of mutual respect and peaceful cooperation. Today's events have shown us that this assumption was incorrect. She reached the exact center of the chamber and turned to face War Master Kazak directly. You wanted to know what happens when humans stop being polite, War Master. You are about to find out. Sarah looked around the chamber one final time, her gaze taking in representatives who had spent years treating humanity as useful servants rather than equals. This concludes humanity's participation in Galactic Council proceedings. We thank you for your time and wish you well in your future endeavors. Good day. She walked out of the chamber with the same calm, measured steps she had used to enter. Behind her, the chamber erupted in shouting, demands for explanation, and what sounded like panic from several species. Sarah did not look back. In her quarters an hour later, she composed a single message to Admiral Ross. Phase 1 complete. Initiating withdrawal protocols. The response came back immediately. Understood. Welcome to Phase 2. As Sarah prepared to leave the council station for the last time, she could hear emergency meetings starting in chambers throughout the facility. Representatives who had spent years ignoring human concerns were suddenly very interested in talking to humanity, but there was no one left to talk to. The humans were done talking. Dr. James Wright had been working on Proxima Beta for 3 years, leading a team of mixed-species scientists in developing new quantum fold technology. The research station was humanity's pride and joy, a symbol of peaceful cooperation and shared knowledge. On the morning after Ambassador Chen's dramatic exit from the Galactic Council, Dr. Wright quietly began packing his personal belongings. His Zephyrian colleague, researcher Melodis, watched in confusion as Wright carefully placed his family photos and personal data pads into a small travel case. "James, what are you doing?" she asked, her musical voice carrying notes of concern. "We are so close to a breakthrough with the quantum matrix calculations." Wright looked up from his packing with a sad smile. "I'm sorry, Melodis. I have to go." "Go? Go where?" "We have 6 months left on this project. The funding is approved. The council is expecting results." Wright sealed his case and activated his personal communication device. "Computer, implement Protocol 7 authorization, Wright Gamma 77. The station's computer responded immediately. "Protocol 7 confirmed. Initiating secure lockdown of all human research data and equipment. Estimated completion, 4 hours. Melodis made a sharp, discordant sound of alarm. "James, what is Protocol 7? What is happening?" "I can't explain everything right now," Wright said gently. "But I need you to know that this isn't personal. You've been a wonderful colleague and friend. I hope we can work together again someday." Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. On 17 different worlds, human medical teams were quietly packing their equipment and preparing to leave. The doctors and nurses who had been fighting the Andorian plague for 2 years were suddenly unavailable for comment. Dr. Sarah Martinez had been leading the medical effort on Andor Prime, where the plague had killed millions of the blue-skinned humanoids. Her research team was the only group that had made real progress against the disease. "Doctor," called out her Andorian assistant Thylik, as she prepared to board a transport shuttle. "You cannot leave now. The new treatment protocols are showing promise. We could save thousands of lives." Dr. Martinez paused at the shuttle door. "The treatment protocols are in the medical database. Your people can continue the work. But the database is encrypted. We cannot access the human research without authorization codes." "I'm sorry, Thylek. Those codes are no longer available." On 37 different worlds, massive terraforming projects ground to a halt as human engineers simply walked away from their posts. Projects that had been running smoothly for decades suddenly found themselves without the expertise needed to continue. The Crystalline Confederation had been depending on human engineers to expand their mining operations in the asteroid belt. The unique human ability to think creatively and solve complex problems had made their operations 3 times more efficient than before. Engineer Captain Maria Santos had been overseeing the installation of new mining platforms when she received the recall order. She gathered her team and began shutting down the construction equipment. Captain Santos called out Mining Director Ziz, his crystalline form refracting light in patterns that showed extreme distress. "You cannot stop now. We have contracts, we have deadlines. Our entire production schedule depends on completing these platforms." "I understand your concerns," Santos replied politely. "You'll need to make other arrangements." "Other arrangements?" "There are no other arrangements. Human engineering techniques are decades ahead of anything else available. We specifically hired humans because no other species could do this work." Santos finished her equipment shutdown and turned to face the mining director. "That sounds like a problem you'll need to solve, Director Ziz. Good luck." The most disturbing aspect of humanity's withdrawal was not what they were doing, but how they were doing it. There were no angry speeches, no demands for better treatment, no threats or ultimatums. Humans were simply leaving. Every human departure was polite and professional. They completed their immediate responsibilities, secured their work areas, and departed with the same courtesy they had always shown. But when asked to explain their actions or negotiate new arrangements, they simply smiled and said they were no longer available. On the council station itself, panic was beginning to set in. The various species had called 17 emergency meetings in the past 2 days, trying to understand what was happening and how to respond. In the Zephyrian section, Representative Zixus was dealing with reports from colonies across their territory. "Our atmospheric processors are failing," reported one colony manager. The human technicians were the only ones who understood the advanced filtration systems. "Contact the human embassy," Zixus ordered. "Offer them better compensation." We tried. The human embassy is closed. All communications are being routed to an automated system that thanks us for our interest and suggests we develop alternative solutions. Council Speaker Vorth was having similar problems in his own office. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy about human withdrawals, and none of it made sense according to normal political behavior. "Species don't just disappear," he muttered to his aide. "There should be negotiations, demands, some kind of explanation of what they want." His aide, a nervous creature called Snippet, made worried, chittering sounds. "Sir, we tried to contact the human homeworld directly. We offered to reconsider the trade route situation. We suggested forming a special committee to investigate the merchant ship incident. And they thanked us politely and said they would take our suggestions under advisement. Then they ended the communication. What made everything worse was the strange reports coming from human space. Scout ships from various species had detected massive energy signatures around human worlds. Construction projects on a scale that seemed impossible. Gravitational anomalies that suggested industrial activity beyond anything previously seen. But when council ships tried to investigate, they were met by human vessels of unfamiliar design. The conversations were always polite and brief. Unknown. "Vessel, you are approaching restricted space. Please maintain minimum safe distance and alter course. This is Council Scout Ship Horizon. We are on a diplomatic mission. We request permission to approach Earth for negotiations. Your request is noted. Permission denied. Please maintain minimum safe distance and alter course. Thank you for your cooperation. We have important matters to discuss with human leadership. Your message will be forwarded to the appropriate authorities. Please maintain minimum safe distance and alter course. Have a pleasant day." The scout ships found themselves gently but firmly escorted away from human territory by vessels that seemed to appear from nowhere and disappear just as mysteriously. Even more unsettling were the automated messages that began appearing on communication networks throughout the galaxy. The same message, broadcast in every known language. "The United Earth government is currently operating under Protocol 7. All non-essential contact with external species has been suspended pending policy review. Human personnel and resources are being redeployed to priority projects. We appreciate your patience during this transition period. Thank you." Council members who had spent years treating humans as useful but subordinate allies were beginning to understand that they might have made a serious mistake. The galaxy was a complex system, and humans had been quietly involved in keeping much of it running smoothly. Medical research centers were struggling without human doctors who had specialized in treating diseases that affected multiple species. Engineering projects were failing without human creativity and problem-solving abilities. Diplomatic efforts were breaking down without human mediators who could find common ground between species that hated each other. Most worrying of all was the realization that humanity had prepared for this situation. Their withdrawal was too smooth, too well organized to be a spontaneous reaction. This was not an emotional response to a single tragic incident. This was the implementation of a plan that had been ready for years, maybe decades. War Master Kazax was not concerned by these developments. In his private chambers, he reviewed reports of human activities with satisfaction. "Let them run home to their little corner of space," he told his advisors. "This makes expansion easier for the Empire. Humans were in our way anyway." But his intelligence chief, a scarred veteran named Grizd, was less confident. "War Master, our spy networks in human space have gone completely silent. Every human we had cultivated as an information source has disappeared. And the energy readings from their industrial worlds, what about them? They suggest construction projects larger than entire Saurian fleets, War Master. Much larger." Kazak waved a dismissive claw. "Humans build things. That's what they do. They will build new homes and new ships, and they will stay out of our way. This is good for the Empire. But as the days passed and the reports continued coming in, even Kazakh began to feel the first small stirrings of doubt. Humans were supposed to complain, negotiate, and eventually give in. They were not supposed to simply vanish and leave the rest of the galaxy to figure out how to function without them. And they were definitely not supposed to be building something massive in the darkness of their own space, while the rest of the galaxy wondered what they were planning. For the first time in years, the Galactic Council was learning what the galaxy looked like without humanity's constant quiet. The first sign of real trouble came from the Outer Rim territories, where humanity's early warning systems had been monitoring the barriers between galaxies. The Void Swarm had been a nightmare from humanity's early space exploration days. Creatures from outside known space that consumed matter and energy, leaving nothing behind but empty darkness. 50 years ago, scientists had developed containment fields to keep the Void Swarm trapped in the spaces between galaxies. The barriers were massive constructions of energy and technology, invisible to most detection systems but absolutely critical to keeping the galaxy safe. Now, those barriers were failing. The emergency alert reached Council Speaker Vorth's office at 0630 station time, delivered by a panicked technician from the Outer Rim monitoring station. Speaker Vorth, we have a critical situation. The containment fields in sectors 12 through 15 are showing massive power fluctuations. We're detecting barrier degradation rates of 30% and climbing. Vorth felt his four-chambered heart skip a beat. Like most species, the Cathari had relied on human assurances that the Void Swarm was contained and not their problem. Most council members had never bothered to learn the details of how the barriers worked. Contact the human technicians immediately, Vorth ordered. Sir, we tried. The human maintenance crews were withdrawn 6 days ago. All their equipment is locked down under something called Protocol 7. We can't access any of the control systems. Vorth stared at his communication screen in growing horror. How long do we have? At current degradation rates? Maybe 72 hours before total containment failure in the affected sectors. Within an hour, emergency sessions were being called throughout the galaxy. The Void Swarm was not a political problem or a trade dispute. It was an extinction-level threat that could consume entire solar systems. The Zephyrian Collective was the first to attempt direct contact with humanity. Representative Zixis personally transmitted a priority message to Earth, offering unprecedented concessions in exchange for technical assistance. The response came 12 hours later from someone identifying himself only as Admiral Morrison, Earth Defense Command. Admiral Morrison appeared on the communication screen as a middle-aged human with gray hair and calm blue eyes. When he spoke, his voice was professional and completely without emotion. The United Earth government acknowledges the Galactic Council's request for assistance with the Void Swarm containment breach. We have reviewed the situation and confirmed that barrier failure is imminent in multiple sectors. Zixis felt a surge of relief. The humans would help just like they always had. Admiral, we are prepared to offer significant compensation for emergency technical assistance, whatever Earth requires. I appreciate the offer, Morrison interrupted politely. However, as we are no longer operating under diplomatic protocols, we are unable to provide civilian technical support. Our assessment indicates you have approximately 72 hours before total containment failure. We recommend immediate evacuation of the affected sectors. The communication ended. Zixis stared at the blank screen in shock. The humans had essentially just told the galaxy to abandon entire sectors of space to the Void Swarm. Similar responses were received by every species that attempted to contact Earth. Polite acknowledgement of the problem, professional assessment of the timeline, recommendation to evacuate, no offer of assistance. It was Council Speaker Vorth who finally understood what was happening. In his emergency meeting with the senior representatives, he laid out the terrifying reality. The humans were never just helping us with various projects, he said, his voice heavy with the weight of realization. They were maintaining the basic infrastructure that keeps our civilization functioning. Representative Zixis made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. That's impossible. The barriers, the medical research, the engineering projects, surely other species contributed. Did they? Vorth asked quietly. When was the last time any of our species developed new technology that wasn't built on human innovations? When did any of us take responsibility for maintaining critical systems? The meeting room fell silent as the representatives began to understand. They had all become dependent on human knowledge, human innovation, and human willingness to solve problems that other species ignored. But the worst realization was still to come. Intelligence reports were flooding in from across the galaxy, all describing the same phenomenon. Human space was showing massive industrial activity, but not the kind of activity that suggested a species preparing to hide in their home systems. Energy signatures indicated planetary-scale manufacturing. Gravitational anomalies suggested the construction of vessels larger than anything in the known galaxy. Resource extraction operations were running at levels that defied understanding. "They're not retreating," whispered technical advisor Grimm of the Hegemony Coalition. "They're preparing." "Preparing for what?" demanded War Master Kazak, who had been unusually quiet during the emergency meetings. The answer came from an unexpected source. The Aquatic Collective, whose homeworld was closest to human space, had been monitoring human transmissions with their advanced sensory equipment. Ambassador Depths of Wisdom spoke in the burbling, translated voice of her species. "We have detected human communications that reference something called the Independence Protocol. The messages suggest that humanity has been preparing for complete separation from galactic civilization for approximately 150 Earth years." The room erupted in shocked sounds from multiple species. 150 years? Vorth's voice was barely above a whisper. "Affirmative. Human industrial capacity appears to have been operating at approximately 30% of maximum capability during their participation in galactic civilization. Current readings suggest they are approaching full operational status." War Master Kazak finally spoke, his voice lacking its usual confident bluster. "What does that mean? Full operational status?" Ambassador Depths of Wisdom's next words sent ice through the veins of every representative in the room. "Our analysts estimate that humanity's true industrial and military capacity may exceed that of the rest of the galaxy combined." The meeting dissolved into chaos as representatives from dozens of species began shouting questions, demands, and what sounded like prayers in various languages. Through it all, one fact became increasingly clear. Humanity had not been the weak, emotional species that others had believed them to be. They had been the caretakers, quietly maintaining the systems that kept galactic civilization running while building their own capabilities in secret. And now they had decided that the galaxy could take care of itself. The next morning brought even worse news. Saurian intelligence reported that human vessels of unknown design had been detected moving through space at speeds that seemed to violate known physics. When Saurian ships tried to intercept them for identification, the human vessels simply vanished. "They're using technology we've never seen before," reported Intelligence Chief Grist to a visibly shaken War Master Kazak. "Stealth systems, propulsion methods, weapon signatures, none of it matches anything in our databases." "How is that possible?" Kazak demanded. "We've been monitoring human military development for decades. Apparently, we've been monitoring what they wanted us to see." The final piece of the puzzle came from the most unlikely source. A maintenance worker on the council station discovered a sealed chamber that had been marked as a storage area for the past 50 years. When opened, it revealed a sophisticated monitoring station filled with equipment that no one recognized. The equipment was clearly human in origin, but far more advanced than anything humanity had ever publicly demonstrated. It had been recording and transmitting data from every council session, every private meeting, every classified communication that had passed through the station. Attached to the equipment was a simple note written in standard galactic script. "Thank you for your cooperation. The information gathered here will be useful in determining humanity's future relationship with galactic civilization." The note was signed, Earth Intelligence Service, established 2157. As the representatives stared at the evidence of humanity's long-term intelligence operation, one thought occurred to all of them simultaneously. If humans had been watching and preparing for over a century, If they had been maintaining galactic civilization while secretly building their own superior capabilities, if they had been ready for this exact situation, what else were they ready for? The answer to that question was about to become terrifyingly clear. The crisis reached its peak when War Master Kazak made the worst decision in Saurian military history. Emboldened by humanity's apparent withdrawal and convinced that they were dealing with a species in retreat, Kazak ordered a full military strike against the former human research station at Wolf 359. Intelligence reports suggested the facility had been abandoned, making it perfect for claiming as Saurian territory. The humans have shown their weakness, Kazak declared to his assembled fleet commanders. They run from confrontation. They hide in their home systems. Now we take what should have been ours from the beginning. The Saurian attack fleet was impressive by any standard. 12 heavy battleships, each bristling with enough firepower to level a small moon, supported by 50 escort vessels and multiple squadrons of fighter craft. It represented one of the largest military forces ever assembled in that region of space. What they found waiting for them at Wolf 359 changed everything. The human research station was not abandoned. It had been transformed into something that defied every assumption the galaxy had made about human capabilities. The facility now stretched across multiple asteroids, connected by energy bridges that pulsed with power readings beyond anything in Saurian databases. But it was not the station that shocked the attack fleet. It was the ships. Floating in perfect formation around Wolf 359 were vessels that looked like nothing anyone had ever seen. They were sleek, elegant, and absolutely enormous. The smallest human ship was larger than a Saurian battleship. The largest was the size of a small space station. Most unsettling of all, there were no energy signatures, no heat emissions, no radiation markers. The human ships appeared to be running on technology so advanced that Saurian sensors could barely detect them. Fleet Commander Huskert, leading the assault from his flagship Death's Glory, tried to contact the human vessels according to standard military protocol. Unknown human ships. This is Fleet Commander Huskert of the Saurian Imperial Navy. You are occupying territory claimed by the Saurian Empire. Withdraw immediately, or face the consequences. The response came immediately, broadcast on all channels, with crystal clarity. Fleet Commander Huskert, this is Admiral Morrison. You are trespassing in human space and have committed acts of war against civilian targets. Your vessels will power down weapons and surrender immediately, or we will be forced to defend our territory. Huskert's laugh was a harsh bark that echoed through his ship's command center. Human, you are outnumbered 50-1. Your people are cowards who run from real fighting. Surrender now and we may allow you to live. I see, Admiral Morrison replied, his voice remaining completely calm. Commander, are you familiar with the human concept of giving someone enough rope to hang themselves? What? It means allowing your enemy to make mistakes that reveal their true nature. Thank you for being so cooperative. What happened next lasted exactly 8 minutes and 17 seconds and was broadcast live to the Galactic Council through emergency monitoring systems. The human ships did not charge into battle like traditional warships. They did not form attack formations or attempt to outmaneuver the Saurian fleet. Instead, they simply moved. One moment, the Saurian fleet was in perfect attack formation, weapons charging, and fighters launching. The next moment, human ships were somehow positioned exactly where they needed to be to disable every Saurian vessel with surgical precision. The humans did not destroy the Saurian ships. They systematically disabled them. Weapon systems were somehow overloaded from the inside, causing no damage to the ships themselves but leaving them completely defenseless. Engine systems shut down in perfect sequence, leaving the vessels drifting but intact. Communication systems continued working perfectly, ensuring that every Saurian crew member could hear what was happening. Throughout the entire engagement, Admiral Morrison's voice remained polite and professional as he addressed each disabled ship individually. Saurian vessel Death's Glory, your weapons and propulsion systems have been disabled. Please prepare to abandon ship. You have 30 minutes before we recycle your vessel for raw materials. Saurian vessel Bone Crusher, your crew will find emergency life pods fully stocked and ready for use. Please note that any attempt to repair weapon systems will result in immediate recycling of your entire ship. The most disturbing aspect was not the speed or efficiency of the human attack, but the complete lack of effort it seemed to require. The human ships never appeared to strain their systems or use their full capabilities. This looked like a training exercise, not a life-or-death battle. In his command chair aboard the drifting Death's Glory, Fleet Commander Huskert stared at his tactical displays in pure shock. His entire fleet had been neutralized by an enemy that seemed to treat military combat as a minor inconvenience. "Admiral Morrison," he managed to croak into his communication system. What are you?" The reply came with the same calm professionalism that had characterized all of Admiral Morrison's communications. "We are what we have always been, Commander. The difference is that we are no longer pretending to be less than we are." Across the galaxy, the leaders of every major civilization watched the battle footage with growing horror. The Saurian Empire represented one of the most powerful military forces in known space, and they had been casually swatted aside by humans who treated the encounter as routine pest control. But Admiral Morrison was not finished. As the last Saurian crew members evacuated to their life pods, Morrison opened a general communication channel that reached every monitoring station, every government building, and every military command center in the galaxy. "Citizens of the galaxy," he began, his image appearing on screens throughout civilized space. "I am Admiral Morrison of the Earth Defense Command. 3 weeks ago, Saurian military forces murdered 237 human civilians, including 63 children. Today, those same forces attempted to invade human territory." Morrison paused, looking directly into the camera, with eyes that showed no anger, no hatred, no emotion at all except calm professionalism. For over 150 years, humanity has participated in galactic civilization under the assumption that other species shared our values of mutual respect and peaceful cooperation. Recent events have shown us that this assumption was incorrect. Behind Morrison, the massive human fleet hung in space like a promise of things to come. The ships that had effortlessly disabled an entire Saurian attack force were clearly only a small portion of humanity's actual capabilities. Effective. Immediately, the United Earth government is implementing new policies regarding our relationship with galactic civilization. Humanity will no longer provide free assistance to species that consider us expendable. We will no longer maintain critical infrastructure for civilizations that cannot maintain it themselves. We will no longer tolerate attacks on human civilians by military forces of any species. Morrison's expression softened slightly, and for a moment he looked like the diplomatic humans that galactic leaders remembered. However, humanity has not abandoned our values of cooperation and mutual benefit. We remain open to establishing new relationships with species willing to engage with us as equals rather than as useful servants. Any civilization interested in genuine partnership rather than exploitation is welcome to contact us through proper diplomatic channels. The Admiral's expression became professional again as he addressed his final point. To those species that prefer the previous arrangement, where humans were expected to provide free assistance while receiving contempt in return, we respect your choice. We have adjusted our policies accordingly. Earth Defense Command has been authorized to treat any further attacks on human citizens or territory as acts of war, requiring immediate response. Morrison looked once more at the disabled Saurian fleet drifting in space around him. The wreckage of Fleet Commander Huskert's vessels will serve as a reminder that humanity's courtesy was always a choice, not a weakness. We hope this clarifies our current position. Thank you for your attention. The transmission ended. In the Galactic Council chambers, representatives from dozens of species sat in stunned silence. The humans had not simply defended themselves, they had demonstrated technological and military superiority that made every other fleet in the galaxy look like toys in comparison. But perhaps most terrifying of all was the realization that this was still humanity being polite. Admiral Morrison had disabled the Saurian fleet rather than destroying it. He had given clear warnings rather than attacking without notice. He had offered partnership to species willing to treat humans as equals. This was humanity with their courteous mode supposedly turned off, and they were still more civilized than most species at their best behavior. Council Speaker Vorth was the first to break the silence. "Send a message to Earth immediately," he ordered his aide. "Tell them the Galactic Council formally requests a diplomatic meeting to discuss new partnership arrangements." "What should I say we're offering?" the aide asked nervously. Vorth looked at the tactical display showing human ships that could apparently appear anywhere instantly and disable entire fleets without breaking a sweat. "Whatever they want," he said quietly. "Whatever they want." In the aftermath of what became known as the Wolf 359 incident, galactic civilization underwent rapid changes.